In 1852, a man admitted to a mental asylum in France claimed that his body was undergoing a strange transformation. Although he was physically normal, he told his doctor that he had cloven feet, sharp fangs, and that his body was covered in long hair. He was convinced that he had become a werewolf and asked the doctors to give him raw meat. His request was granted, but he refused to eat what was given to him, simply because it was not corrupt enough. He then asked the doctors to take him to the forest and shoot him to end his suffering. They did not pay attention to his request and finally he died in the same hospital. A few years ago, another man with a similar problem approached the Dutch psychiatrist Jan Dirk Blom. He complained of increased hair growth on his arms, tightening of his jaw and facial muscles, and the growth of fangs that had left small sores around his mouth that only he could see and not others, but Dr. Bloom could see none of these. Before going to the hospital, this man had searched for information about his condition on the internet. While this idea seemed far-fetched, he did not accept any other explanation and assumed that he had become a werewolf. Dr. Bloom's patient, the Frenchman with a split leg, and other werewolves that have found their way into medical texts are not the werewolves of horror movies or popular stories, but real people. These people don't turn into wolves when the moon rises, and in most cases doctors can't see any of the physical changes they complain about. Instead, they suffer from a condition called clinical werewolfism, also called lycanthropy or lycomania, which is a rare mental disorder characterized by hallucinations and delusions of becoming a wolf. The first reported case of lycanthropy or werewolf that Dr. Bloom could find in old European texts was a French man in 1852. In ancient times, lycanthropy or werewolf in European mythology meant the literal transformation of man into a wolf and vice versa, which was associated with a wide range of fields such as lunar influence, magic, and demonology. Bloom began to examine historical works, and even where metaphysical and supernatural explanations were offered, he found, upon further investigation, what he envisioned as explanations of a more rational nature. At the beginning of the 2nd century AD, Galen and Marcellus, Greek doctors, considered narcissism as a disease instead of a manifestation of Satan's dominance. Later, in the early Middle Ages, medical treatments for lycanthropy were devised, which included diet, complex herbal medicines, hot water baths, soul cleansing or breath cultivation, vomiting and bleeding until fainting. Greek and Byzantine doctors considered this disease to be a type of melancholy, mania, epilepsy or imbalance, or attributed it to drug use. These medical explanations did not seem right. Bloom argued that, for example, in 17th century England, werewolves were commonly considered victims of hallucinations due to extreme melancholia, not because English doctors were so far ahead of their continental colleagues, but because the wolf race had become extinct in their country a long time ago, and the issue of werewolfism had given way to similar legends such as cats and rabbits. In the 19th century, supernatural explanations were abandoned, and Western doctors basically considered clinical narcissism to be a delusional belief, for which the best treatment is medication. Even today, the underlying causes of this situation are not well known and well documented. Dr. Bloom believes that this disease, because it occurs together with other symptoms, directs the minds of doctors towards more common and normal diagnoses such as schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, etc. As a result, clinical narcissism may be underreported. Of course, it should be mentioned that Zakaria Razi, an Iranian physician of the 4th century Hijri, also considered the werewolf or werewolf to be a kind of mental illness. But unless, as the famous saying goes, so that nothing happens, people don't say things, then where did all these same images of an evil and bloodthirsty creature come from, and have they grown and developed jointly in different parts of the world that are not necessarily connected to each other? Found? The fact is that although there can be no such thing as a werewolf or a werewolf, some of the traits and behaviors attributed to werewolves may occur independently in people. Of course, unlike vampires, who happen to be the main enemies of werewolves according to some newer stories, who have a well-groomed appearance and a calm and charming demeanor, werewolves are wild and violent monsters, and the only way some newer stories suggest to kill them is to shoot silver bullets to their hearts or to separate their heads from their bodies. The belief in the power of these creatures is so great that in some rural areas of Europe, especially in Germany, they still do not use the word wolf. They believe that there is a power in the name of this creature that summons it when spoken, and they usually use words such as an animal that must not be named to name it. The first thing to pay attention to is the primitive people's fear of wolves. Living in pristine areas and living in harmony with nature, especially when man was going through the first periods of animal husbandry and his livestock meant life for him, has turned the wolf into a terrifying creature. In order to know why humans are so afraid of wolves, it is not bad to take a look at the lives of wolves. Wolves. You can find the gray wolf in almost all regions of Iran. They are one of the most social hunting creatures. Wolves usually live in packs of between 2 and 25 wolves, and there is always a leader wolf who leads the others. This leader wolf, who is also called the alpha wolf, is responsible for leading the group, announcing the time to move and rest, and the beginning and end of the hunt. Researchers believe that wolves communicate with each other with the help of body movements, and due to their high hearing power, they use their famous howls to communicate with each other and their neighbors. Howls that wolves themselves can recognize from 40 kilometers away. In this way, wolves should be classified in the category of the most intelligent hunters. Their group and coordinated hunting had become a bitter nightmare for humans living in natural areas, and the eeriness of a dark space and a moonlit night in which the shadow of a wolf can be seen from afar, making its terrifying howl, can be the source of many legends. But beyond that, ancient man had better excuses to complete his werewolf legend. Look at the components of this legend. A human being bitten by a wolf turns into a werewolf, and during the transformation, he undergoes a severe illness. Werewolves take on a wolf-like appearance and usually change their appearance during the full moon. All three of these cases have evidence in reality. Perhaps the most incredible part of the werewolf lore is the humans in wolf form. Although it seems far-fetched, there is a disease that causes such a change, and it is known as werewolf syndrome. This disease, which is referred to as hypertrichosis, is a condition in which the human body witnesses the rapid and excessive growth of hair in places that normally lack hair. In some cases, this hair growth is limited only to the face, and in some cases, it develops to all parts of the body. Sometimes this hair growth becomes so much that it causes the appearance of the face to deform. The cause of this defect is a rare genetic mutation. But the result can be scary even today, let alone in the era when there was no understanding of this issue. Another thing is related to the dependence of turning into werewolves on the full moon. The fact is that the full moon cannot have any effect on humans. The only effect that the moon can have on the earth and people is the gravitational effect, which during the full moon period is not much different from other phases of the moon. But it can be psychologically effective. There are different types of mental illnesses that have a specific time period. Some of them are known as cyclothymia. During a certain period of time, a person experiences nervous attacks. This peak cycle of mental illnesses, when the person reaches the peak of abnormal behavior, is sometimes accompanied by monthly periods that may correspond to the period of the moon's rotation around the Earth. It is for this reason that some patients with mental injuries are called lunatic. These real appearance complications, along with the fear of wolves, are a good excuse for people to keep the legend of werewolves alive. Werewolves have no place in the realm of science, but beyond it and in the realm of legend and popular belief, they are still powerfully alive. In terms of appearance, humans cannot turn into wolves, but some of the evils that humans commit sometimes make us think that we have actually insulted wolves by attributing the attribute of wolves to humans. The painful and not so lovely way of this transformation is the one that is generally talked about and emphasized by today's stories. If in certain circumstances a special wolf bites you, and even worse if a werewolf bites you, after a not so comfortable and painful period, on the first night when the full moon shines in the sky, the stages of your change will begin. Your skeletal structure will be disturbed, hair will grow rapidly on your face, your nails will become extremely long, your face will become snotty, and your eyes will change. In fact, after a few minutes you will become a full-fledged werewolf. Of course, this is not the only way to become a werewolf. In some legends, the sinister and legendary power of the wolf has tempted some to turn themselves into werewolves. One of the easiest methods is to take off your clothes and tie a wolf skin belt around your waist. This is a method that has been mentioned in another way in the East. Muhammad bin Mahmud bin Ahmad Tusi refers to this story in the book Ajaib al-Makhluqat wa Ghaib al-Mujadat and says, "And if they make a belt from the skin of a wolf, whoever wears it will be brave." In some legends, this simple solution becomes more difficult, and one has to put on a full wolf skin and cover oneself under it to become a werewolf. In parts of Italy, France, and Germany, it is also believed that if a person sleeps outside the house on a certain Wednesday or Friday night in the summer season, in such a way that the moonlight falls on his face, he will turn into a werewolf by the end of the night. Of course, there are other methods. The torment of turning into a werewolf is such that in some witchcraft methods it is used as a curse, and they believe that a person can be turned into a werewolf by the magical effect of the curse. And at the end of the new era, it also witnesses strange changes. Werewolf syndrome, which causes the entire face and body to be covered in hair, occurs in only 1 in a billion people, but the Songli sisters in India surprisingly inherited all 3 from their father. And they have wolf-like faces. The origin of the legend of the werewolf dates back to 1591 in the villages around the German cities of Klagen and Badberg. At this time, Europe was under the dark shadow of ignorance. The cities were backward and people lived near the forests, therefore, the fear of wolves was always with them like a nightmare. The attacks of these animals on humans were seen repeatedly, so that people were afraid to travel from one point to another. Every morning, they found half-eaten human bodies in the fields and tried to find and destroy these vampire animals. But one day, a truth was revealed to the residents of Klungen and Badberg, which changed everything. According to an old document, some people were caught by a wild wolf and sent their hounds to fight him, and they themselves attacked him with sharp spears. They did, but surprisingly, this wolf neither ran nor defended, it just stood, and after a few minutes, it turned into a middle-aged man. They recognized this man. He was Peter Stabler from their own village. Stabler was the first human that mankind encountered. Under torture, he confessed to killing 16 people, including 2 pregnant women and 13 children. The stages of his downfall were even more strange. At the age of 12, he was interested in magic and began to practice in this field, and by his own admission, Stable made a pact with the devil at this age and started killing people. He didn't even have mercy on his own son and killed him and ate his brain, and since the monstrosity of Stable was beyond people's understanding, they also gradually created and accepted the legend of werewolves.